constitutional recognition will endure, but the legislative details can be changed by the Parliament if and when it chooses to do so. If we come to see that recognition of Indigenous Australians involves mutual recognition of British and migrant Australians, then the people of Australia will vote to build this greatest bridge, and the referendum will succeed. Of this, I am certain. In my lecture, I will traverse three periods of our history. Let me first refer to who we were. This is the period from 1788, moving past 1901 and ending in 1967. Emerging from a screening of a 2019 documentary about the end of the career of footballer Adam Goodes, I thought about the trouble Australians have with Aboriginal people. The trouble is readily called racism. Certainly racism has something to do with it, but the reality is not that simple. We are a much unloved people. We are perhaps the ethnic group Australians feel least connected to. We are not popular and we are not personally known to many Australians. Few have met us and a small minority count us as friends. And despite never having met any of us and knowing very little about us, other than what is in the media and what W.E.H. Stanner, whose 1968 Boyer lectures looms large over these lectures, called Folklore about us, Australians hold and express strong views about us, the great proportion of which is negative and unfriendly. It has ever been thus, worse in the past, but still true today. If success in the forthcoming referendum is predicated on our popularity as a people, then it is doubtful we will succeed. It does not and will not take much to mobilise antipathy against Aboriginal people and to conjure the worst imaginings about us and the recognition we seek. For those who wish to oppose our recognition, it will be like shooting fish in a barrel. An inane thing to do, but easy. A heartless thing to do, but easy. Unlike same-sex marriage, there is not the requisite empathy of love to break through the prejudice, contempt, and, yes, violence of the past. Australians simply do not have Aboriginal people within their circles of family and friendship with whom they can share fellow feeling. My reflection on the Goodes film produced three thoughts. First, there is the original sin of Australian racism against Aboriginal people. The old assumption Aborigines were innately inferior and subhuman was the strongest idea for almost 1.5 centuries of colonial thinking. Listen to Stanner speak of how these ideas still formed the folklore of Australia at the end of the 1960s.
I was asked the other day whether I did not agree that the Aborigines must have originated and evolved within Australia, My questioner was an earnest and a sensible man, and I asked him why he thought so. His answer was because they are in every way so unlike any other people in the world. He was quite unaware that he was expressing a view common in Australia more than 130 years ago, a view which has stolidly withstood all the biological, anthropological and archaeological information built up since that time. The popular folklore is like that, and our folklore about the Aborigines shows the qualities which distinguish it everywhere, a splendid credulity towards the unlikely, and an iron resolve to believe the improbable. It mixes truth and half-truth and untruth into hard little concretions of faith that defy dissolution by better knowledge.
They are, in every way, so unlike any other people in the world. I believe original sin racism has greatly receded, and the vast majority of fair-minded Australians are repulsed by it. If there are now few remnants, its legacy is still prevalent. It is the second part that explains the enduring antipathy against my people today. It is the problem Australians have about the place the settlers/invaders have in this country vis-à-vis our people. It is a troubling and unsettled question involving denial and defensiveness and how to deal with guilt and truth. It is also such an old question, going back to colonial days. If the colonists recognised the Indigenous, then would that not be a repudiation of who they were and their place in this country? It is this fear of repudiation that lies at the heart of the country's trouble with Aboriginal people. The country just does not know how to deal with recognition without the fear of repudiation. Denial and a visceral antipathy is the residual. After the discombobulation of the Goods film, I realised a third aspect of this trouble. It is what I call white versus white over black. A large part of the conflagration in these past 50 years since racism became unacceptable in the 1960s is the fight between progressive and conservative Australians over race and over Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people are the subjects of this fight, but they are not its prime protagonists. This is what is now the culture war between liberals and conservatives in the United States and progressives and conservatives here in Australia. That we have followed the Americans in this is unfortunate, but not surprising. Race and the Aboriginal problem of Australia is about white Australians in a cultural and political struggle with other white Australians. It is yet another agenda of the culture wars. The progressives are seen as and see themselves as sympathetic to the Aborigines and see their conservative opponents as bigoted and determined to hold on to the legacy of the country's old racism. And yet, as I will discuss later in my lectures, this dichotomy is not necessarily true. My realisation after Goods and his travails was that without sorting out that complex of matters falling under the rubric of recognition, we will forever think that what we call racism is at the heart of our problem as a nation rather than our not knowing who we are. Of all the claims I will make in these lectures, this is the boldest and one of which I am most convicted. Racism will diminish in this country when we succeed with recognition. It will not have the same purchase on us, neither on the majority party that has defaulted to it over 2 centuries, nor the minority that lives it, fears it, and who too often succumb to the very fear itself.